Owner asks homeless man to leave the premises, but he keeps coming back. He decides to do this, and… What would your reaction be if you found a homeless person sleeping behind your business night after night? Unfortunately, many of us will react by default with skepticism or contempt towards those we don't immediately understand. It's often all too easy to judge others by their appearance, feeling superior just because they look better, wear clean clothes, or have a roof to live under. A shame, honestly. Fortunately, there are still those who will manage to overcome the barrier of prejudice that society imposes on us and remind us of the importance of having an open mind and how a little compassion can help those who need it most. Today's story takes us to faraway Tennessee, where longtime respected gym owner Roderick Duncan will demonstrate the true meaning of charity. Duncan was 40 years old and a lifelong member of the God Boy Gym in Memphis. In fact, he himself was a student of the gym's former owner, Mr. Clark, who went out of his way to care for each and every person who entered his gym. For him, they were more than just members. They were part of his family, and he cared about their lives as if he were a father. And that is precisely what he was to Duncan during his childhood, the father he never had. For Roderick, Mr. Dennis Clark was the closest thing for having a family, as his father had been in jail since he was 3 years old, apparently for a bank robbery gone bad, and his mother was an alcoholic with whom he barely spoke. Mr. Clark picked Duncan off the street when he was only 7 years old. He was dirty, hadn't eaten for days, and was crying and wandering the streets near his gym. Clark set him on the right path in life, restored his faith, and taught him everything he knew about the sport he loved most, boxing. From then on, his whole life revolved around the sport. He never made it as a boxer, although he tried and was very talented, but eventually decided that his path in life would be to follow in his mentor's footsteps and become the next trainer and owner of the God Boy. As the years went by, Mr. Clark began to need more help because of his age and the disease he was suffering from, Alzheimer's. Although the disease progressed slowly, there were fewer and fewer things he could do without Duncan's help, and when one day Mr. Dennis disappeared because he forgot the way home, Duncan made the drastic decision to commit him to a medical facility and assume full responsibility for the gym. At the age of 35, Roderick had already earned the respect and affection of the whole neighborhood and was very happy to be able to take over from Dennis and continue helping all the young people who, like him, found in boxing a refuge for their lives. Mr. Clark passed away 5 years later due to the advanced state of his illness. He barely recognized anyone and barely spoke, but he left this world in peace, accompanied by his best friends and some of the longtime members of his gym, whom he had always considered his own family. Dennis Clark did not have much money, and his only possession in life was his gym, which did not make him rich, far from it, but it brought him much more than any millionaire's salary could do. Since he hadn't married and had no children or direct relatives to whom to leave a legacy, in his there was only one person, Roderick Duncan, to whom he bequeathed his gym, his house, a small apartment 2 blocks from the gym, and all his savings. The notary read Clark's will aloud, and as he did so, Duncan couldn't hold back tears. "Everything I have is for Roderick Duncan, the person who made me realize that family goes beyond blood, and to whom I owe all the happiness and love of my last years of life, Dennis Clark." After the death of his mentor and the most important person of his life, Duncan focused on trying to improve the gym, doing a complete renovation of the facilities, and offering a wide variety of sports services to attract a wider audience and gain new members quickly. And he succeeded. In fact, today the God Boy is among the top 5 gyms in the city of Memphis, and Duncan has earned the respect of the sports community, becoming one of the most well-known trainers among young aspiring boxing enthusiasts who want to become professionals in the sport. Life had never been better for him, and he knew that he would always owe part of his success to Mr. Clark. Without his help and his legacy, he would never have amounted to anything in life. So every day when he looked at everything he had and felt fortunate to be able to lead a good life, he reminded himself, be grateful for everything you have, but never forget where you came from. Stay humble and try to help others just as they helped you. Duncan repeated to himself like a mantra every time he felt he was acting contrary to what Mr. Dennis had taught him. And that's precisely what he had to remind himself once again when just a few months ago, he found himself in for a big surprise as he closed the back door of his gym. Every night, Duncan was the last one to leave his gym, and he was the one who was in charge of locking all the doors and setting off the security alarms to prevent break-ins. However, as he locked the back door and was about to get into his van to go home to rest, Roderick realized he wasn't alone. There was someone sleeping in one of his old cars behind the building. "Damn, another bum snuck into the car," he said to himself as he realized who it was. In the last few months, crime and the appearance of panhandlers sleeping in every corner of the neighborhood had multiplied, and for Duncan this was the 3rd homeless man to sneak into the back of his gym. At first he tried to be nice and offer them another place where they could stay, but seeing that they all reacted aggressively and with insults, he decided to stop being nice and be more radical with them. And that's what he intended to do with that beggar. He would throw him out of there quickly and make it clear to him this was not his place. Hearing him scream, the person hiding between a couple of dirty blankets woke up very frightened and ran away. Roderick thought that was the end of the story, but that was not the case because the next day he saw the same individual in the same place. Duncan steeled his patience and again he asked the stranger to leave, and he did. However, he never left completely. This situation dragged on for weeks. Night after night, he would close his gym and there would be this stranger sleeping in the car. It became a routine for the two of them. Duncan would ask him to leave, he would leave, and the next day he'd come back. Nothing changed except it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to send him away because he already felt he knew him from something. Even if he didn't know who he was, he had been there for so long that he began to worry about him, and that led him to make a decision that would change everything. One night, as he was getting ready to close the gym and heading toward the back, Duncan had an idea. Instead of kicking him out like always, he would offer him to come into the gym to warm up and offer him a hot cup of coffee. During all the weeks he tried to get rid of that stranger, he forgot something very important that he always repeated to himself: to be humble and help those who needed it most, just like Mr. Clark helped him when he was a kid wandering around crying on the streets of Memphis. Before he could knock on the window of the car he was crawling into sleep, I said to myself, you know what, go back to the gym, make a hot cup of coffee, and offer him a cup. Duncan recalls as he spoke to a local news reporter who wanted to tell his story. What neither of them could have expected was that this simple gesture of kindness would end up changing both their lives. What Duncan brought the young man that night was much more than a cup of coffee. It was a new way of looking at life. That night, Duncan approached him with understanding and compassion and saw how the homeless man he kept yelling at to leave was no longer an anonymous homeless man, but a young man with a very complicated story. The two shared a hot cup of coffee that evening, and little by little, a beautiful relationship began to blossom. Duncan learned that the stranger's name was Brian Taylor, and he also learned of Brian's troubled childhood, his struggles with alcohol as a teenager, and his deep desire to change his circumstances and become someone better. Their relationship grew every day with their long conversations, and soon Duncan began taking Brian to get his ID card made, wearing new clothes and taking him to job interviews. Brian even went from sleeping in old cars behind the gym to a couch at Duncan's house. Roderick became like a father to him, protecting him and guiding him down the right path in life. Some people need more than one chance. Most kids take a while to stop hitting their heads. I was a complicated kid myself and needed a lot of help and patience to grow into the man I am now, Duncan admits in his interview. However, Brian's growing up was not so straightforward. They both admitted that their relationship had its own turbulence and required patience on both sides. They didn't always agree and argued about many things, but they learned to trust each other and become more tolerant, as happens in any parent-child relationship. In the end, it turned out that from that first cup of coffee and their late-night conversations, a powerful friendship was forged that would help them both become a better version of themselves. For Brian, the stability Duncan provided allowed him to start taking steps in the right direction without fear of making mistakes. With the confidence of his new mentor and the security he instilled in him, he was able to find a new job and give his heart and soul to it. The young man had always felt lost in life and had never had a purpose. Now, thanks to Duncan and his advice, he knew exactly what he wanted and what he had to do to fulfill all his dreams. I'm a changed person, Brian says. I had got a job, I have more confidence, I have a smile on my face, and it's all thanks to this generous man who took me into his life, Brian explained excitedly to the newspaper. For his part, as a gym owner and personal trainer, Duncan was used to helping people work towards their goals, but he always did so within the realm of sport, not personally involved. However, his encounter with Brian was something much more important because it forced him to rethink his judgment and change the way he viewed people in a positive direction. What Duncan brought to Brian was hope, something we all tend to lose when we're in trouble and have no one to help us through it. He gave him a new life, a new perspective. You could say he saved him from a terrible fate just as Mr. Clark did for him. The relationship that these two very different people developed should serve as a reminder of how important it is to keep an open mind and always try to lend a helping hand when we have the power to do so. You never know when it might be our turn. Life takes many turns and luck comes as fast as it goes. Duncan and Brian's story is the best example of this, and a nice way to remember the importance of being more humble and willing to help anyone in need. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.